Welcome, everyone, to the 30-minute Midas touch from beautiful Dyersburg, Tennessee at the Herb Welsh WrestlePlex. Now, here is, pound for pound and inch for inch, the best of the best in professional wrestling today. A wrestling genius worth his weight in gold. The Golden Boy, Greg Anthony.
Welcome, everybody, to the fourth episode of the 30-minute Midas Touch. I am your host, the Golden Boy, Greg Anthony, and with me, as always, is my co-host. He is the master of the moss-covered three-handled family credenza, Mr. Mark Tipton.
Well, thank you for that introduction. I don't know if I can live up to those kind of credentials, but I do appreciate the introduction anyway. It's good to be with you once again for another podcast here. I'm always excited to be here. And this week, one of the things what I'd like to discuss with you and what we're getting ready to discuss is the timing of things. In life, as in professional wrestling, both it's fair to say in both cases, timing is everything.
Absolutely. And kind of the basis for this particular episode is this great story that I've heard over the years, and it's been told a couple different times on several different things, and I'm going to go through it. But it illustrates perfectly how timing is everything, especially in professional wrestling. So let's go back to 1987. Ricky Steamboat wins the Intercontinental title from Randy Savage in one of the greatest matches of all time, right? WrestleMania 3. And so Steamboat wins the title, but then I guess he understands that he's got a young child at home or his wife's pregnant or whatever the case may be, but he decides to put in his notice and he's going to go home. So that leaves the void of, well, who do we put the Intercontinental title on? So the office kind of thinks about it and they decide they're going to put it on Butch Reed, natural Butch Reed, which Butch Reed is an amazing talent. It would have been a great run. The problem is that they decided to do it on the last night Steamboat was going to be in the Boston Garden, and they decided to put it on Butch Reed. Well, Butch Reed no-shows. And there's been, Butch has come out and talked about many different situations of why this happened or why he wasn't there. It wasn't his fault, whatever it may be. But Butch Reed was not there to win the Intercontinental title. So, and this is Steamboat's last night. And so they have to do a switch. So they're thinking, who do we need to do a switch to? And apparently Hogan and Vince were talking, and as they're talking, Honky Man turns the corner. And Hogan goes, well, what about Honky? Honky Tonk Man would be perfect for this, kind of thing. So that's what they did. They went with Honky Tonk Man. So then the scenario goes that, well, they were actually putting it on Butch to get it to Savage, because they were promised Savage this big babyface Intercontinental title run. So when they go to tell Honky, hey, listen, we want you to put over Savage. Apparently they had a meeting with the two, and we're going to do this, and with you, Savage. And apparently they turned to Honky and said, we'll build you back up. Kind of a disrespectful kind of thing to Honky Tonk Man. So Honky Tonk Man, being the businessman that he is, decided, well, I'm not going to put him over then. Right? If this is my one shot at whatever, and there's no guarantee of anything on the backside of this, I'm going to make the most of this. Right? So he decides I'm not going to put him over. So then the office says, well, we've already promised Randy Savage this big babyface run. What do we have to do? Right? So then they say, well, why don't we make Savage's babyface run for the world title? Right? So then Savage becomes the world champion. So then it becomes a scenario of, and that's at WrestleMania 4. So then the situation becomes, we had actually promised the title to Ted DiBiase. So what do we do with Ted? So then they come up with the idea, well, Ted, your character wouldn't want to be the world champion. He would have his own title. He would be the $1 million champion. And that's where the $1 million title came from. So if you look at this one instance of timing, Steamboat saying that he had to go home for his kid, or Butch Reed no-showing the event, whichever one you want. Think of the lives and the careers and the wrestling history that was changed in these few beginning decisions. It's almost mind-boggling to see, and that's kind of the way professional wrestling really is. It is timing is everything. Timing is everything in the ring. Timing is everything with politics. Timing is everything with everything inside and outside the business. So that's kind of the basis for what we're talking about today. And to me, that is the the epitome of story of this is what we're talking about.
Well, that is a remarkable story. And as I was sitting there thinking, we were talking about how it impacted those people, but I thought just the people you listed off, with the obvious exception of Butch Reed, there were tremendous implications for the career. The Honky Tonk Man, who became champion on a whim, is still to many regarded as he self-proclaimed, the greatest Intercontinental Champion of all time. And then the Macho Man, he went on and became the WWE Champion at WrestleMania 4, which is, I remember, took place in a tournament at that WrestleMania. And to me, it was one of my favorite championship victories because it was multiple matches that he had to go through to become champion. That was very impressive. And then the $1 Million Championship is synonymous with Ted DiBiase. It is obviously his, and it is still recognized. I still see references to it today. And all that happened because one individual was unable to appear.
And that's the way it happens for a lot of us too. You know, like people get opportunities because you show up. You understand? And if you're unreliable or this happens or that happens, that it becomes someone else's opportunity. And that's kind of the same thing that people have asked me. Well, Greg, how did you get hooked up with Bobby Eaton when me and Bobby Eaton were a tag team for 2 years and we were called Midnight Gold? Well, a lot of people wonder, well, how did that happen? Well, Bobby was moving to the area. He was moving to Arkansas, but Arkansas, Tennessee area. And basically what he wanted to do was he actually wanted to tag with two guys. He actually wanted to tag with someone in Arkansas and he wanted to tag with someone in Tennessee and kind of give them the rub. So, and he was getting near the end of his career, so he was having trouble working singles matches, but tag matches obviously being his specialty, and being Bobby Eaton, he could still do very well in tag matches. So he really wanted to do a tag gimmick with two young guys. Whether this was Brian Thompson's idea or whoever's idea it was, that was the plan. So when he first thought of it, it was supposed to be two guys. Well, they picked a guy in Arkansas, and luckily Coach BT actually suggested me for the Tennessee spot, right? So we were going to have an Arkansas guy and a Tennessee guy, and I was the Tennessee guy. Well, somewhere in between everything, somebody had said something to the Arkansas guy and didn't think it was a good idea for him and kind of got in his head, and he turned down the opportunity to be Bobby Eaton's tag team partner. So guess what happened? I took both spots. So I became the sole guy benefiting from this thing. And that's what we talk about. Timing is everything. You understand? Like, because I was in the right place at the right time and I said yes to an opportunity, I ended up with double the opportunity. And instead of tagging just in Tennessee, we tagged all through Arkansas and did stuff all over the place. And like I said, we tagged for 2 years. So timing is everything.
Okay, well, I'm trying to deal with the idea of someone thought it wasn't a good idea to tag with Bobby Eaton. You have now you've blown my mind. You've thrown me off there. I'm trying to imagine a scenario under which that would be true for anybody. Bobby Eaton, a remarkable wrestling career by any measure. Obviously known as a tag team specialist, but remarkable. And his professionalism and what he wanted to do in this tag team, what he was looking to do. He was looking to benefit someone else. And you obviously took advantage of that opportunity and made the most of it.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I've said it before, like, without Bobby Eaton, I don't know if we're here right now and I'm the same Golden Boy Greg Anthony, because he set my career on a different trajectory than would have been possible otherwise. Because a lot of people didn't know who I was before I started tagging with Bobby Eaton. Then all of a sudden it was like, well, who's the kid tagging with Bobby? And all of a sudden Meltzer had put it in one of his, one of the newsletters, and like people were asking about it and people started talking. So that was my first like real, okay, he's kind of getting the rub. And like you said, Bobby is not just one of the greatest wrestlers of all time, but he's one of the greatest people of all time. He would give you the shirt off his back even if he just met you, and I almost saw that on several occasions. And what he did for Midnight Gold and for myself was he never allowed me to take a pin the entire time we teamed. If a promoter came in and said, hey, we'd like you guys to, go under to this team, we'd like to beat Greg with this, that kind of thing, Bobby would pipe in and go, no, we're not beating Greg, we're beating me. And sometimes the promoters would be shocked and like, okay, absolutely. And sometimes they'd actually try to argue a little bit and be like, well, we want to beat Greg. And he's like, we're not beating Greg ever. You know what I mean? And I would, the people would walk away and I'd say, I'd thank you so much, that kind of thing. He said, this is for you, it's not going to hurt me to ever get pinned ever again. You understand? We want people to know who you are and what you're doing, things like that. This has helped to give you the rub. Once again, and that was timing. I don't know if Bobby would have done that 20 years earlier, but here we are. We're on the backside of his career, and he's on his way out, and he understands all the people that helped him like that and put him over and put him in positions like that. And here's his opportunity to give back. And I was the recipient of that.
Well, as I was listening to you describe that situation, the word that came to my mind was professionalism. What you just described being portrayed by Bob Eaton, aside from being a good human being outside of it, as a professional wrestler, he was demonstrating tremendous professionalism. You were talking about how he wanted to take the pin so that it did not happen to you. But I did think if whoever was getting the pin on Bobby Eaton, it would mean a great deal to that person to say, hey, I pinned Bobby Eaton. And so you're looking at a win-win situation. He got what he wanted. He protected you. He got to help elevate whoever you were facing. So that's a benefit to them. And so to me, and at that point in his career, it sounds like an ultimate example of professionalism in professional wrestling.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I mean, and that's what I said. Bobby Eaton is widely considered one of the nicest guys in professional wrestling, and this is a prime example of it. You know what I mean? And because of my association with Bobby Eaton, another, magically timed thing happened for me, and that was when we were tagging. I took a singles booking in Arkansas. And it was one of those shows, like I said before, it was a bullshit show. We get to the show, and, the guy hadn't really promoted it. So there's, 12 people there, right? And, of course, he gives the old promoter speech of, well, guys, the house is down, If you guys want to stay and wrestle, you can, but I can't guarantee you a payoff, that kind of thing. And me being who I am, I of course, said I'll wrestle because I'm here. I drove all this way. I love wrestling. I'm not going to go home without wrestling, at least getting some ring time or whatever it is. And Matt Riviera was on this show, and this is the first time I'd ever met Matt. And I obviously heard about him because he had been on the Megan Wants a Millionaire show, and he'd been wrestling, a couple years, and I knew of him. We knew of each other, and actually he wanted to book the Midnight Express for his shows. But obviously, Midnight Express was all broken up at that time, all over the country, and Bobby was in Arkansas, and me and him were tagging. But he didn't know me, right? He knew Bobby, and he wanted Midnight Express, which is understandable, right? So we're on this show, and like I said, I work first match. I work this kid that's had less than 10 matches, I'm guessing. I'm pretty sure that's what it was. And, I have the match. Had a really, really good solid match with the kid. I come to the back, and Matt looks at me and goes, how long have you been training the kid? And I go, he's not my kid. He's so-and-so's kid. I just met him, like an hour ago, 40 minutes ago, whatever it was. And he goes, you went out there and you had that match with that kid who's that green, and you've never met him before? And I said, yeah. And from that point on, Matt Riviera booked me on everything he ever had. And as you know, that ended up being traditional championship wrestling, which was on national television. We were in 50 million homes at one point, and CWA and all the great stuff he did in Arkansas with that. But because I took one bullshit booking in Arkansas, I ended up getting all these major opportunities. He put me in the ring with so many amazing talents, the Matt Hardys, Zach Gowans. A lot of my resume is coming from working for Matt. because he believed in the Golden Boy Greg Anthony, and timing wise, it just so happened to be we were in the same place at the same time. So that's why I tell guys, like, when guys, young guys especially, when they go, well, I'm not leaving my house unless I get X amount of dollars. Well, then sit your ass at the house. You know what I mean? Like, if you're not in this business to, one, get better and to wrestle, you understand, then, you're in the wrong business. So I took a chance on a booking. And, like I said, I didn't get paid that day. And there was 12 people in the crowd, so we know it wasn't like we set any records or changed the world or anything like that. But, it became such a huge opportunity for me because of that one booking.
That is an impressive story, because what you're describing is you may not have gotten paid that day, but the events of that day paid benefits for years into the future of your wrestling career up to this moment. And that's remarkable. And the impression you made on Matt Riviera, and leading on into other things. Is there anything else you'd like to expand on your relationship with Riviera that carried forward?
Yeah, I mean, me and Matt, from that point, we end up, we became really good friends, and we ended up becoming best friends. I was actually best man at his wedding, and we always been pretty simpatico about everything when it comes to wrestling and how it needs to be presented. Do we agree 100% on everything? No, of course not. He thinks David Lee Roth is the greatest of all time, and I kind of like Sammy Hagar myself, So we disagree about some things, and that's just one thing we kind of argue about. He likes Baron Corbin. I hate Baron Corbin. There's certain things we disagree about, but for the most part, 90% we agree on most things, and we're just really good friends, and just inside and outside of wrestling too. I really feel like even if we didn't have wrestling in common, I feel like we would be friends either way, because we're both, we're both Christians. We're both from the South. We both, conspiracy theorists, if I can kind of say that, right? We have that in common. We do a lot of this stuff. So me and Matt have always been, have been close, especially the last 10 years, so that's, and once again, that all goes to timing. If I had met Matt when I was 20 and he was, 18, we may not be friends. We may have got on each other's nerves and it never happened. But because we met each other when he was a promoter and I was a wrestler trying to make it to the next level, because we met at that right specific time, everything clicked, and it went on from there. We still have a great relationship.
That's a tremendous example of timing is everything, and those are two personal examples of the timing in professional wrestling and the effect it has on careers. What I contemplated is, are there any other examples outside of your personal career that you'd like to discuss that define this situation?
There's wrestling is literally every story you have is timing. Everything. I remember a story of Ted DiBiase told one time where he met this guy, and he said he was I think he was like 400, 500 pounds. He could move like a gazelle. He was charismatic. He had all this stuff coming for him. And then, DiBiase had to tell him, like, listen, if this would have been any other time, you'd be a star in professional wrestling. But it just so happens Yokozuna is the heavyweight champion in WWF right now, and there's not a place for another guy like you right now. You understand? He's already filled that spot. He's already filled that role. You understand? So timing is everything. Whether you miss it or whether you get it, timing is still the end factor. We talk about superstar Billy Graham. This is a huge. Billy Graham was obviously ahead of his time. He was in phenomenal shape, steroids or not. He was still in phenomenal shape, and he was about 10 years early, 10, 20 years early on a lot of that stuff, right? And Vince McMahon Sr., the way Vince Sr. did business was when you won the title, he told you when you were going to win it, and he told you when you were going to lose it. He knew exactly what those things were. So he knew that Superstar Billy Graham was going to win the title, but he was going to hold it for a year, and then he was going to drop it, no matter what. And Vince Sr. kind of stuck to his guns no matter what on that kind of stuff. So Billy Graham wins the title, and of course he has massive success in that year. I mean, he became one of the hottest thing in wrestling, at that point. And but that year was up, and it was time to go with Bob Backlund, and that's what they did. You know what I mean? Timing is everything. Like I said, if Billy Graham had came along just 7-8 years later with Vince Jr., would his career had benefited much more? Would he have been the Hulk Hogan in the scenario instead of Hulk himself? Because Hulk took everything, not everything, but he borrowed quite a bit from Billy Graham, right? So would Billy Graham have been Billy Graham-mania? You know what I mean? Like it could have been something like that. So and like I said, but Vince Sr. was so dead set on, hey, you're winning it here, you're losing it here. This is my plan. This is what we're doing. And I actually think Billy Graham went into a depression after that because he had done what he was asked to do, became successful, but at the end of the rainbow, he still had to lose a title. As to where most promoters might have called an audible and said, okay, hey, let's ride this wave while we got it. You know what I mean? And Billy Graham didn't understand that, and he went into depression. I think he completely, that's when he became Karate Billy Graham, where he shaved his head and did the goatee and was completely different. And it was like he was just like a deep depression. You know what I mean? So once again, timing strikes again, whether good or bad. Once again, there it is.
Well, you're talking about timing in the promoter you're dealing with, because it seems pretty clear from the story as you laid it out. Had Vince Jr. been running the organization at that time, Superstar Billy Graham might have had a very different career than what he did. As remarkable as it was, I don't want to diminish what he did. He did have a tremendous career, but it is remarkable that the inflexibility of Vince Sr., and it almost sounds like Vince Jr. did not want to make that mistake, and that benefited, obviously, Terry Bollea, for those who wish to refer to him as that, and totally changed professional wrestling history with Hulkamania and everything that came along with it. Do you have any other individuals in mind you'd like to cite as an example?
Like I said, it's kind of a, pick 'em. I mean, today, like in today's wrestling, for instance, merchandise sales contribute to a lot of people's success on camera. You understand? If the New Day had never sold a T-shirt, would we have got the pancakes and the cereal and all that Booty-O's and all that kind of stuff? I mean, you know what I'm saying? Like, would they have got any TV time at all if they hadn't have, had that merchandise push, right? So then you look at a guy with that mindset. Okay, let's think about somebody that was a little bit before when they started doing that, right? Like John Cena, he pushed merchandise, so he became, he was a focal point, So what about the Hurricane? You know what I mean? Like nowadays we're looking at guys that are, 180, 190 pounds, and they're the heavyweight champion anyway, right? So that was always Hurricane would never be the heavyweight champion because he's too small. Well, that's not a factor in today's WWE, right? So if the Hurricane was in the top 2-3, merchandise sellers, like I think he was back in the day, would they have considered him for maybe the big run? You know what I mean? It's very possible. You know what I mean? So we're talking about a guy that, just 10 years, 10 years difference, and we could have seen something completely different out of his career. You know what I mean? I obviously had a great career. We all know who he is. That's great. But, if you ask him, could I have been? You know what I mean? Especially in the scenarios we're talking about. We talk about, like, I'm personally of the opinion that I want the heavyweight champion to be a heavyweight. I think bigger guys do draw more money. But we're talking about timing in this situation. So, like, timing-wise, if this is what they're doing nowadays, then why couldn't Hurricane be that guy today? You know what I mean? So, timing, the timing that we need is all around us. You can pretty much name any wrestler or any story in professional wrestling history, and there's some timing involved to tell, whether they did or didn't make it,
Well, that the Hurricane, and that because he's someone who had wrestled for some time and certainly hadn't achieved the success that that character brought to him, and it was just about being the right guy at the right time, at the right place, with the right persona, or however you want to define it. Timing, once again, tremendous on his part. Would you like to expand on that, or do you have any others you would like to discuss?
Well, pick one.
Well,
let's trivia me a little bit. Just pick someone random.
Just pick an individual at random, and see if timing might have impacted their career. Right. Well, we are in Western Tennessee. Okay. Memphis wrestling is what it is, and so let me just start with Jerry the King Lawler.
Okay, that's a good example, Jerry the King Lawler. So, Jerry Lawler didn't set out to be a professional wrestler. He's an artist, right? So he didn't go to wrestling school and train for a year and then, start doing jobs on television and, stuff like that. He drew, the wrestlers, and he sent them into the television station. And I think it was Jackie Fargo himself who saw him doing it. And they actually showed his stuff on air with Lance, showed his stuff on air. And that one scenario pulled him into the business because he was a wrestling fan, obviously, but I don't think it really registered in his mind to be involved in wrestling. He just wanted to draw, So he drew the stuff, he put it out there, and then Jackie Fargo eventually I contacted him and say, hey, would you do some stuff with the program or for myself? Or whatever it was. I think he's told this story on his podcast or some other podcast before. But, he started working for Fargo a little bit and doing here and there. Then all of a sudden he worked for Fargo a little bit. Then he got a little closer to him. Then he started doing, random wrestling stuff. You see what I'm saying? Like all that timing stuff became because he drew some artwork and sent it into Memphis Television. And now we have Jerry the King Lawler, who's been wrestling for 50 years, correct? Who's been wrestling for 50 years and is the biggest star in Memphis wrestling history. Timing is everything.
And it makes you wonder what would have happened if he doesn't send in any of those drawings and to, I guess, Jackie or Lance Russell or whoever it was that received the things and took an interest of them. If he had not chosen to do that and not send it in, if he had just been satisfied to say, well, I'm going to do this on the side and enjoy it. And obviously the art is something that he's done throughout his career, and he still does today. It's but just to think how that changed into all the career that he had, ended up in the WWE Hall of Fame, among other things, and all the years he ran that Memphis territory, and all the championships that were won, and success he had at the Mid-South Coliseum for years and years.
Absolutely, and that's what I'm saying. Like it's literally it's with everybody and everything. And I think we're coming up on time here, but I think I've got a really good one that you're going to enjoy, and I think all the people at home will enjoy too. Is here's the greatest one, a great timing one. What happens if Magnum TA doesn't have the rec? A lot of people say, well, does actually, one of the wrestlers last night, they asked me, hey, if Magnum doesn't have the rec, does Magnum become Flair? Well, no, he doesn't become Flair. But here's the real kicker. If Magnum TA never has the rec, do we get Sting? Do we get the Sting that became the face of the company, that became all that kind of stuff? Because Magnum's spot was basically Sting's spot. Sting did the Clash 1, had that 45-minute thing with Flair. They created a new babyface. Here we are rocking and rolling for the next 2 years. Here we go, right? If they didn't have to create Sting and they already had Magnum lined up, then Magnum's the babyface. Magnum's the guy. So that makes every other babyface 2-3. You know what I mean? So that completely changes the course of wrestling history too. Are we watching Sting on AEW Dynamite this week, or are we watching Magnum TA come out and blister Cody Rhodes, with some kind of scathing promo? You know what I mean? Does he have the same longevity that Sting has had, or does he filter out in the mid-90s? I mean, we just don't know. But that's another huge, what-if factor within professional wrestling. What do you think about that, Mark Tipton?
I had not considered that, but thinking about it, that clearly changed. Sting's career could have been remarkably changed. He, for all honesty, he may have ended up in the WWE the way the Warrior did, because they had been a tag team prior to that. He may not have been it. And this is an individual who became known as, well, up until his later years, the most famous professional wrestler who never worked for Vince until the run around WrestleMania 31 and so forth. And all that could have been changed by the happenstance of an automobile accident.
And God works in mysterious ways. We never know what it is, but I mean, I think that's a huge what if, and I think that's one of the biggest what ifs in professional wrestling. And I'm glad we got to cover it here on the 30-minute Midas Touch. But our time is up. Like I said, we will never be ever 30 minutes on the dot. We're going to be a little under, most time a little over, but as promised, we are in and around 30 minutes. And I want to thank my co-host, the master of the moss-covered three-handled family credenza, Mark Tipton. And to everybody out there who enjoyed the 30-minute Midas Touch, we will see you next week right here. Woo!